Running Scared by Lynn Cook. Chapter 1. Natalie Connor, lead to her friends, was always happiest walking with Sam through these woods, especially on a day like today. The rain had held off and the sun was shining, which just seemed to put that extra little spring in her step. Sam was walking ahead of her. He was such a good dog. A white and brown Staffordshire Bull Terrier, which to anyone that didn't know him could appear quite intimidating. But in fact, he was afraid of his own shadow. He wasn't actually Lee's dog at all. He belonged to her neighbour, but since he had crawled under her fence many years before, they had been the best of friends. The proof of that being, she didn't even need to have him on a lead anymore, as he knew exactly where he was going, because it was where they always went when they came here together. They reached their destination, which was a small clearing set beside a private estate, where one of the largest trees in the woods grew, at least in Lee's opinion. This had been her favourite tree since childhood, and there amongst the array of initials on its trunk were her own to prove it. After sitting herself down on an old fallen tree trunk, as she always did, she allowed the whole beauty of her surroundings to overwhelm her. It never ceased to amaze her how perfect and tranquil one place could be. The flowers, the trees, the bushes, the stream, even the estate sitting the other side of the fence that ran parallel could probably boast to be one of the most beautiful houses she had ever seen. Second to her own, of course. It was small wonder she liked to spend so much of her time here. Lee took a deep breath and closed her eyes as, despite her good mood, she was also feeling a lot of anxiety. Tomorrow was a very big day for her, as it was the first day of her new job, and hopefully a big step in furthering her career. Public relations was not a new industry for Lee. She had been working within it for quite a few years now, but never for such a prestigious company as Phillips. She had got used to being a noticeable fish in a very small pond, but as of tomorrow, she was a guppy in the ocean. It was going to involve a lot of hard work and long hours, which was of no concern to her. In fact, she was looking forward to it. But what had her heart breaking into was leaving her home. Surrey was not the end of the world, but Lee knew that she would soon tire of the daily commute into London, not to mention the safety aspect of travelling alone at all hours of the day and night on public transport, and to drive was absolutely out of the question. The only sensible solution would be to find somewhere to stay during the week near where she would be working, and just make do with coming home at weekends. Lee was so engrossed in her own thoughts that she didn't hear the stranger that was calling to her from the other side of the fence. Even as he came closer, yelling even louder, she was still oblivious. "Are you deaf?" This screamed at the top of his voice finally got her attention, and she spun her head around, very startled, and took a couple of seconds to regain her surroundings. "Well?" he boomed. She looked first in his direction, which, although he was close to the fence, was still a good 10 feet away from her, and then behind her to see if there was anyone else around that he could be shouting at. Whoever he was incredibly angry, and Lee could not imagine what she could have possibly done to have made him so upset. "I'm talking to you, for Christ's sake!" He seemed to be getting angrier by the second. Lee got to her feet and started walking towards him. Who did he think he was to scream at her like that? "I wouldn't exactly call it talking, but what seems to be the problem, and what the hell has it got to do with me?" she snapped. He seemed somewhat taken aback by her tone. It was at this point Lee noticed the rifle he was holding by his side. He was obviously the gamekeeper or estate manager, but surely he didn't think she was a poacher. Perhaps it wasn't the most intelligent thing in the world to antagonize a complete stranger with what she could only assume was a loaded weapon, but she was too angry herself now to care. The stranger took a deep breath. "Is that your animal?" He was quieter now, but no less angry. Lee looked in the direction he was indicating to see Sam running around with a very large Doberman on the other side of the fence, having found some way through it. What was it with this dog and fences? "Oh my God!" Lee put her hands to her cheeks, all anger replaced now by concern for Sam's safety. "Please tell me he isn't vicious." "He is a she, and I don't think it's fighting that your animal has in mind, he responded sarcastically. Lee looked back in confusion, but soon realised what the stranger meant. They were chasing each other around, rolling one way, then the other, and of course, there was the obligatory bum sniffing, with no sign of aggression. In fact, if anything, they seemed to be flirting with each other. Lee tried to hide her smile, but obviously didn't do a very good job. I'm glad you find it amusing, but I, on the other hand, am more particular as to my animal's mating partners, so I suggest you remove him immediately. She looked at him with knitted brow. He must be well over 6 feet tall, wind-blown blonde hair, almost the same colour as her own, and the most amazing blue eyes she had ever seen. Under any other circumstances, she would have to admit that he really was quite handsome, but such charitable thoughts were far from her mind right now. I'm not sure who you think you are, or why you feel you have a God-given right to talk to people however you choose, but I think you need to calm down just a little. I'm sure you feel you have the most important job in the world, but there is still no reason to be rude, especially as there's no real harm done, is there? My job? He looked incredibly indignant. For your information, I am not an employee on this property. Really? Lee feigned surprise, very much past caring. Then my next guess would have to be that this, she waved a hand in the air, indicating the estate, is all yours, and you earned your fortune running a string of charm schools. She stepped back away from him. Sam, come here. Sam looked up at her, but seemed to be in no hurry to leave his newfound friend. Sam, now! Reluctantly he came towards her, scrambling under the fence the same way he got in. She turned back to the stranger, not quite finished with him yet. Might I suggest, as you seem to have such an abnormal fascination with your animal's potential mating partners, that you take better care of your grounds and get your fence fixed? He looked down his nose at her. In point of fact, this entire estate belongs to my parents, but I will be sure to pass along your suggestion, as I'm certain they will be incredibly concerned about your opinion, he sneered. Your parents? Really? She smiled sarcastically. How proud they must be of their little Lord Fauntleroy, and at what a gentleman he's become. Well, run along now and tell your daddy of the very near catastrophe you managed to avert. He may even raise your pocket money. She turned to walk away. He couldn't let her have the last word. If I find that mutt of yours on this property again, I'll shoot him. She spun her head back towards him. If you were to ever touch a hair on that dog's head, I would take that toy you cling to like some sort of prick extension and ram it so far up your arse it will fit perfectly beside that stick you seem to keep up there. She turned and stormed away. She could hear him calling out something, but she just ignored him and kept walking. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. How could people be so rude? Angry at him too, that he had completely ruined her walk, so she took the shortcut home. As she and Sam walked up the gravel drive to her house, it was a close competition as to who was panting the loudest. Sam was easily remedied with a bowl of water. She, however, with her hands still shaking, needed something a little stronger. What a bitch! How dare she insult, patronise and threaten him like that, and then just walk away? She should keep the bloody animal on her lead, he thought as he headed back to the house. After the day he had had, to then run into one of the wild women of Wonga was not exactly what he needed. He slammed the rifle back into the cabinet and locked the door. Prick extension indeed, he half smiled in spite of himself. In fairness, he supposed he had started it, but only because of her dog. Perhaps he did overreact a little, but she didn't have to go off on a tangent the way she had. Then again, he did threaten to shoot her dog. But what was that compared to what she had threatened to do to him? He shook his head. There was no point in denying it further, because the fact of the matter was, he was in a foul mood and had taken it out on her, he acknowledged as he made his way around the side of the house towards his car. As much as he could pretend otherwise, he owed her an apology. Perhaps he could catch up with her on the main road. As he started his car, he kept telling himself it had nothing to do with how attractive he thought she was. He'd hardly even noticed those brown-green eyes that sparkled as she got angry, or those full pink lips that he could easily imagine would make the most wonderful smile. The long blonde hair, the slim waist, the shapely legs, all of it had no bearing on the fact that he was going after her. He smiled to himself. Okay, so he'd noticed all of those things, but he would hardly be human if he hadn't. His first thought was to ask her out to dinner with him by way of an apology, but supposing she was married? He could make his apologies, check out her left hand, and if all seemed clear, then he would ask her to dinner. He reached the main road and pulled the car over, switching off the engine. Here was as good a place to wait as any. He tapped the end of his chin with his indexed finger. Where should he take her? It had to be somewhere impressive, where he could wine and dine her and show her he could be charming when he wanted to be. He shook his head. What was he talking about? She hadn't even said yes yet. The mood she had left him in, she could be just as likely to slap his face. He took a deep breath and acknowledged that he would just have to take that chance. It was the right thing to do, aside from the fact that when she first turned towards him, with little makeup on, her hair in a ponytail, and dressed only in jeans and a t-shirt, she could have held her own in a room full of models. Perhaps that's what she was, he pondered. In a lot of ways he hoped not. From the models he'd known, he wanted her to be more genuine than them and have more substance. He warned himself to calm down and wait to tackle the first hurdle of getting her to talk to him. He was still sat there 20 minutes later. Whatever way she had gone, she was not coming this way. Shit, why had he behaved like such an idiot? There would be no chance of getting to know her now. No apology dinner with whining and dining, and no charming conversation. Nice one, Gregory Phillips, he admonished himself.